Prithvi Shantirantarikshakam Shantir Dyaur Shantir Disha Shantiravantaram Disha Shantiratni Shantir Vayu Shantira Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Rashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantirme Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om.
We will sing verses from Shraddha Upanishad, the last song in the book.
Celestial
Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. According to the lunar calendar, today is the day of Saraswati Puja. So, where the Divine is worshipped as the goddess Saraswati. And Saraswati is seen in the Vedantic tradition as the goddess of knowledge. And that's why I thought this would be a good day to reflect a little bit on knowledge. That what does knowledge really mean? And while many of us know many things, we at some point have to pause and ask ourselves, how much good has all my knowledge done to me? Is knowledge something that happens automatically, or is there an art of acquiring knowledge? What is the difference between a knowledge that is acquired in a haphazard manner and knowledge that is acquired in a systematic way? So these are some of the thoughts behind my mind when I thought of reflecting on this subject. First of all, we recognize that the desire to know is inbuilt in all of us. You can just see it in the eyes of a little baby. And as soon as it's just so beautiful. Just see the baby will be always looking here and there. So through visuals, through sound, knowledge is coming. And of course, as we grow older, what gets into our system is not just these random sensations of sights, sounds, and tastes, and smell, and so on. But gradually, we acquire the ability to interpret what these different sounds mean. And that's the time then when sound begins to make sense. That's when language skills appear. So, and as we see, as when and nowadays especially, when we were little children, we just picked up a book and we just turned the pages. And now the new generation, of course, they just kind of you give them a device, a mobile device, and they'll just keep on swiping and trying to see different pictures or whatever is on the screen. We see this desire for knowledge not only in little children, and of course as we grow up, the online, being online and surfing the net. Again, this is the desire to kind of acquire. Now, none of this may be very well organized, but there is that desire. We see that desire to know when people open up the newspaper or listen to the news on the radio or television. We see the desire to know even among the discussions that occur over a cup of coffee or even in retirement homes. In many different ways, we find that there's always, even in gossiping, there is a desire to know. It's like, well, what is this person doing? What is happening there? So in many different ways, in many different forums, there's always that desire for knowledge. Now, most of us acquire this knowledge in a kind of an unconscious way. I mean, that's just the way our senses are built. We just have to, we really don't have to do anything. Just open our eyes and all the sights automatically come in. And if our ears are in working condition, the sounds automatically go in. And so in some sense, all this sensory data is just going in automatically without too much of conscious effort. Now, we wouldn't want to know anything unless we lacked our knowledge of it. So our ignorance of something is what prods us to know it. So even before we have knowledge of something, we have the knowledge of our ignorance of that thing. So ignorance is a prerequisite for seeking of knowledge. And when knowledge has this, it's not easy to define what knowledge is, but we know what knowledge does. When knowledge of something comes, it removes our ignorance connected with. Just like as soon as you light a match, the darkness in that room disappears. Now, knowledge also brings us fulfillment. When we know something, we feel satisfied. Now, that may not be total fulfillment, but at least a kind of a temporary fulfillment. If there is I am consumed by ignorance of something, and that knowledge comes and that removes it. Now, one of the ancient Upanishads, the hymn that we chanted in the beginning was from an Upanishad called the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. And there's another one Upanishad called the Mundaka Upanishad. Now, there is a portion in that text where a disciple approaches his teacher and asks this question. And the question in Sanskrit is Kasminnu Bhagavo Vijñate Sarvamidam Vijñatam Bhavati. And simply means that, tell me, O Master, what is it knowing which everything will become known? Now that's an interesting kind of a question. I think sooner or later we all realize that compared to this big cosmic cosmos, our Earth may be a tiny little planet, quite insignificant. But even in this tiny insignificant planet, there is so much to know in so many different fields. And none of us has the time or energy to know everything. Some of us think we know everything, but it's impossible to know really everything about everything. And so here is this, it's a very, I think, understandable question when the student goes and asks the teacher, is there any one thing knowing which I would know everything? It's like this, if you have to handle, if you have to like carry, say, 25 keys with you all the time, then it'll be a nuisance to kind of find out every time the key you need. So, and then usually we try to solve that problem by getting a master key. One key that'll open all the locks. Or nowadays, of course, because of all the online subscriptions, and especially when we are told that it's not safe to have the same password for every little thing, they say you have a different password. Now, how many passwords are we going to remember? And so now, therefore, when there is a need, there is a solution. And so now a lot of these password managers apps have come, by which all you need to know is just one password. And that one password then takes care of all the other hundreds of passwords you might have. So this question, is there any one thing? If I know that one thing, everything would be known. I think this question makes sense. When we begin to then think deeply about knowledge, we quickly realize that there are many different kinds of knowledge. And therefore, people who have spent some time thinking on this subject have found there are at least two ways of classifying knowledge. We know that all of the knowledge of the world that comes to us, it comes to us through the sensation of sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. Now, it is always from out there. So knowledge about this, knowledge about that, everything from out there, knowledge seems to go in. It's a knowledge concerning objects, both living and non-living. And therefore, this is called objective knowledge, knowledge of objects. And most people, most of us, we can spend our entire life gathering knowledge about objects, objects of our perception. Again, they could be living, non-living. But that is called objective knowledge. Now, a few people may turn their gaze inward and to find out not just what is out there, outside of me, but what is in here, inside me. So instead of questioning about what is out there, these people then begin to ask questions about themselves. Who is this person who is asking questions about the world? Who is this person trying to gather knowledge of the world? Now, this kind of inquiry is not projected outward, it's really projected inward. So it's not towards the object of our perception, but the subject who is perceiving them. And therefore, this knowledge is called subjective knowledge. So we have this one way of classifying. Objective knowledge, knowledge of objects, and subjective knowledge, knowledge of the subject who is trying to get knowledge. Now, second way of classifying knowledge is by distinguishing between direct knowledge and indirect knowledge. Now, as we have seen, all of the knowledge that we get is filtered through both our senses and our mind. So our senses will get in the sensory data. For instance, now, all that my eyes will do is bring all this color and form. Now, this data needs to be processed. So this data then goes inside, and then based on my whatever pigeonholes in my mind I have, if I see a certain color, and then my mind goes and says, oh, this is color, a red color. Or this form, this kind of a form is called a table or a chair. So all knowledge is really pigeonholing all the different sensations we have. So some information comes, I compare it with my existing archive of information, and if something matches, I say I know it. Now some kind of a sensory data might come in, and I may not find anything corresponding inside. And then I say, I'm not able to figure it out, what it is. I mean, we still have some knowledge. One knowledge would be, this is an object. Well, that's kind of this is sometimes called a general information. So we have knowledge about everything in the sense that this is an object. We may not be able to name the object unless and until we have a corresponding something to match within us. There's a story they sometimes tell about a person who filed a case against another one for defaming him in public. And so when the hearing was going on, he was asked, like, what happened? He says, in public, he called me, I don't remember what he called me a rhino, let's say. And then he said, and so I was offended. He said, when did he call you that? Oh, 5 years ago. Well, 5 years ago he called you that, and now you are angry about it. He said, just this morning I saw what a rhino looks like. So again, so you have that knowledge, but you're not, if you have never seen a rhino before, that knowledge wouldn't make sense. And so whatever knowledge that comes in is processed through both our senses and our mind. And so that kind of knowledge is indirect, because it's not coming straight away, it's getting filtered through my mind and senses. And that indirect knowledge, in Sanskrit, the word for it is paroksha. Para aksha. So it's beyond. It doesn't bypass the mind and the senses. Now, all of the knowledge that we get through books, through lectures, through podcasts, through online reading, through conversations, all of this knowledge is indirect, because all of this gets filtered through our mind and senses, including the knowledge that comes through all the great revealed scriptures of the world, whether it's the Vedas, the Bible, the Quran. All of these texts, when we are studying them, whatever we study, whatever we understand, whatever we read, is actually being filtered through our mind and senses. So all of that knowledge really is indirect or paroksha. So in some sense, we might think, therefore, that the word knowledge is probably not the best word. All of this indirect knowledge that we get is really information. Only when that information is digested, only when that information becomes creates a coherent picture in my mind, we probably might then elevate that information to what we might call knowledge. And then probably we might have to elevate further later on to call it wisdom. But right now, what generally goes by the name knowledge is really a lot of information. Now, as opposed to this indirect knowledge, which gets filtered through the mind and senses, there is another kind of knowledge which completely bypasses the mind and the senses. And that's called direct knowledge. In the Sanskrit word for that is aparoksha. One of the examples that comes immediately to mind is knowledge of our existence. The fact that I exist. I don't need my senses. I don't need to look at myself or to feel myself to know whether I exist. So in order for me to know that I exist, I don't need my senses at all. So there is a class of knowledge which completely bypasses our senses and our mind. In Vedantic understanding, therefore, this objective knowledge and this indirect knowledge, the knowledge that gets filtered through the mind and senses, is sometimes called lower knowledge. And the word for it is aparavidya. And a higher knowledge would be the knowledge that is direct, that does not get filtered. Because no matter how good your filter is, we know over time the filters also need to be changed. Unfortunately, the mind and senses, we really don't have much opportunity to change it. We should therefore but clean them frequently. But filtered and unfiltered knowledge is considered the higher knowledge. In fact, there is in the Upanishads we find Narada was considered a great seeker of truth and eventually an enlightened being. He goes to his teacher and then says that I have studied all the books, I've studied all the scriptures, and yet I have no peace of mind. So in spite of all the study, that complete fulfillment hasn't come. And then the teacher says, well, what you have acquired up to this point is indirect knowledge. Well, indirect knowledge, the knowledge that comes through books and other sources, can help remove many of our doubts. It can answer many of our questions, but it can never bring total fulfillment. A complete fulfillment will come only when that knowledge becomes direct. Think about it this way. You can do a lot of study about, say, coffee. How many varieties there are, how it's grown, and so on. And that can give you a lot of knowledge about coffee. But that doesn't come anywhere close to going to some good coffee shop and then holding that cup of coffee in your hand and then taking that first sip and just feeling it on your tongue. That knowledge, that direct knowledge of tasting coffee will not come to reading a big book on coffee. So that's the difference between indirect knowledge and direct knowledge. So in spiritual life, therefore, reading spiritual books, reading about it, thinking about it, talking about it, it's great. But that's all of that is indirect knowledge. Only when we actually, you see, we can feel inspired about love of God and feel about my love for God and God's love for me, and any different ways we express our spiritual longing. But only if we have tasted that presence of the divine in our heart, even if it's for just 5 seconds, that is much, much more powerful, much, much more enlightening in many ways than just reading a whole library of books. So that's the difference between direct knowledge and indirect knowledge. Now, the kind of reality we are used to is in a constant state of flux. We encounter change all the time around us. Things last for a while and then they go away. In fact, everything changes. People who have lived in a city for a while and they go away, move to another city, and then come visit the city after 10 years or 20 years, and suddenly they say, wow, everything has changed. This happens not only with things outside of us, lifeless things outside of us, it can happen in terms of people as well. Sometimes you meet your friends, maybe after a long period, maybe you meet some childhood friend of yours after, say, 20 years or 30 years. And of course, you're happy to meet old friends. But sometimes we might discover that the friend has changed a lot. Of course, we don't recognize that the change has occurred within us also. Somehow we all keep on thinking, I'm just the same person. So every one of us changes. On the other hand, if somebody doesn't change at all, that's not a good sign either. It's like there is no evolution. So change that occurs all the time. So we have to then also think about the perishable nature of everything around us. If everything is perishable, then we might have to also ask ourselves that what I'm seeing, am I really seeing things as they really are? Maybe whatever I experience may not exactly be how it appears to be. And that is because the instrument that we have to gather knowledge, both mind and senses, they are notoriously not perishable exactly, but changing by nature. We speak about people having moods. Sometimes you're in a mood to do something in the morning, by evening that mood is gone. We know our senses, of course. There is the usual wear and tear due to age, the sensitivity that we have in the eyes and ears and so on. Sometimes due to many other reasons, but definitely due to age, the senses lose their vitality. The mind can become weak, feel weak at times or stronger at times. Now these instruments, because they are not perfect, the knowledge that we get with the help of these instruments is not perfect either. And that's the kind of a question then a seeker of knowledge has to ask. Maybe if I'm able to see things without the help of these defective instruments, I might be able to see what is out there in a more accurate way. So one of the things that seekers of knowledge have come to a conclusion is that if things are changing, then is there anything that remains unchanging behind it? And we can look at that in our own life also. So as I said, in a lot of ways, every one of us has changed. Physically, certainly. When we were born, we weighed only a few pounds. Now we weigh much more. Appearance-wise, also. If we can line up all the photographs of our own, taken at different stages in life, in no two photographs we will look the same. As far as our thoughts, emotions, feelings, hopes, ambitions, desires are concerned, they have been changing also with age. The way we thought when we were children or as teenagers and so on, at different stages in life, our thoughts and emotions have changed. And so, while physically, emotionally, intellectually, we have changing, that somehow we feel I'm still the same person. So in the midst of all this change that is occurring within me, something has remained unchanged. The question that often gets asked is, who am I then? What is my true identity? Is it this unchanging plus the changing? In other words, think about it this way. When I, as a child, grow up to be a teenager, what happened to the child me? So a teenager me is born, and the child me is really dead. We don't use the word death, but that's essentially what has happened. The child me no longer is. The teenager me is there. And then, of course, with youth, we outgrow the teen years. And then with middle age and so on. So these different stages of life, we just call them stages, but really that's a death of a certain identity that's occurring there. If we try to understand our life in this way, then what we really think of as death doesn't seem to be much of a death. If all these earlier things were stages, then what we call as death, the popular idea of death is that's another one stage. Because the I, in spite of all these changes that are occurring, I will continue to be. So all objective knowledge, therefore, will keep on changing. And the question, therefore, then that comes is, if something that is perishable or changing, is it really there? Is there such a thing as temporary reality? And normally we would think, why not? Why not? We can say, well, something is there and it was there for a while and it went away. Why not ascribe reality to something which was there only for a short time? The problem is, there is no problem in some sense if we are consistent with it. The problem is our inconsistency. The most common example, of course, is the dreams. Do we accept that the dream world that I experienced last night, do we say, is it real or unreal? And most of us will say, well, while we are dreaming, that the dreams appear to be real, but when we are wake up in the morning, we are just able to just dismiss most of our dreams. Some of the dreams leave a little deeper impression, and people then try to wonder like what that dream meant, whether it had a message for me and so on. But irrespective of what kind of dream it was, we still are able to just say, okay, now let me come back to the real world. Now, why is it therefore that the dream world appears unreal as compared to this world which appears real? For no other reason, really, that other than that, well, that dream world vanished. It didn't last. In contrast to the dream world, this world, the world that we encounter every morning we wake up, seems to be more persistent. It seems to be there all the time, while dreams, every night we have a different dream. Now, if that's the only reason, and I think that's the only reason, we are able to dismiss dreams as not really real, then we should be able to say that anything that doesn't last, anything that doesn't persist, anything that doesn't have a continuing existence is also unreal. Just to be consistent with our own way of thinking. Unfortunately, we are not consistent, because the very same argument that we can give to show why dream world is unreal really can be applied to this world as well. And it's like this. If dreams disappear when I wake up, this world disappears when I go to sleep. This world doesn't last either. And of course, we know the counter argument to that one. Well, I'm asleep, but the other people are awake, and they are able to experience it. And that seems to be like a solid counter argument, except that we have to recognize that when I was dreaming, there were other people in my dream as well. And when I woke up, the dream ended for me. Am I willing to then concede that the dream world still continued for the other people in my dream? If anyone says the dream world is continuing, well, I just got out of it because I woke up, but it's continuing for the other people, then I think I'm okay with saying that this world is also equally real. But I think I've not met anyone who says that every dream that we have been into is really one parallel world going on somewhere, and we just kind of periodically dip into it. And that is why, just for the consistency, again, this is not to well, let me put it this way. What would happen? What would happen if I even begin to question whether the world that I'm experiencing now is real or not? What this would do, at least in some cases, would be that when I'm not sure about the reality of the world that I'm experiencing, whether in dream or in waking, I would naturally, I think any person would naturally then try to hold on to something of which they're absolutely sure, whose existence is beyond doubt, whose existence is beyond question. And the only stable anchor we have is really our own existence. Our own existence can never be questioned. I can question the existence of anything apart from myself, even God. If I see God as some being somewhere up, open to question. But my own existence is not open to question. And the reason is simply just the logical fallacy of it. I cannot say, I'm not sure whether I exist or not. Because then the question would be, does the one who is doubting exist? Does the doubter exist? Because at least the doubter has to exist. Because the doubter doesn't exist, then there is no doubt without the doubter. So again, the idea is, the equation that's made is, if something is real, it has to be always there. It can never disappear. If it disappears, it's not real. My knowledge of my body disappears when I fall asleep. I'm not even aware of it. My body cannot be absolutely real. Just like the body that I have in my dream, what about the me that I see in my dream? Is the me that I see in my dream real? Well, that person is already gone when I wake up. So the only reality in the dream world is the person who is asleep, who is dreaming. Other than that, everything is an imagination. And therefore, only the existence of the dreamer is beyond question. And therefore, the knowledge, as we truly understand it, would be knowledge of what is real. And therefore, that knowledge we have to go inside to find that knowledge. But that's the difficulty. It's so easy to acquire knowledge of objects, but not so easy to acquire knowledge of the subject. For one thing, our senses are not very helpful in that sense. There is a verse in another one, Upanishad, which we are presently studying every Wednesday, called the Katha Upanishad, and which goes like this: Paranchi khani vyatradat swayambhuhu tasmat parang pashyati nantaratman kaschit dhiraha pratyagatmanam aikshat avrit chakshuhu amrutatvam icchan. It's a beautiful little verse, which means that God, the word that is used in the text is actually swayambhuhu, the self-created one. What did this infinite supreme being do? And the verse says the supreme being has kind of destroyed us by making our senses go outward. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't have to make any effort. Just have to open our eyes, and automatically everything that's outside comes in. So my ears gather sound from outside, the sight, the smell, the touch, everything comes from outside. And then this verse says that because of this, because we are so preoccupied with the objective knowledge, with knowledge of what is out there, that there is little interest and little capacity to find knowledge of the one who is seeing it. As they sometimes say, if you have a lit candle, the candle will give light. Just under the candle, there is darkness. The candle itself is dark. So the irony of the whole situation is that even when we speak about progress and advancement of knowledge, we know a lot about a lot of things, but very little about our own selves, very little about who we really are. And in order for us to then see ourselves, understand ourselves, the senses will have to make a kind of U-turn. And that's difficult. In fact, all practices, really, prayer, worship, meditation, really, are ways by which we are training or disciplining our senses to take a U-turn. And that's why when people meditate, it's helpful to meditate with closed eyes. Because essentially, at least I'm closing the door
to all the sights and sounds and forms. Because this could be distracting, because if I keep my eyes open, they'll naturally go towards all the object. So I keep my eyes closed and then find a quiet place. So as much as it possible, keep all the sounds out. They also advise that not to wear very tight clothing while meditating, because again, the sense of touch will be activated. Also, a good practice not to be eating while you are meditating, so not to activate your taste buds, and so on. And also usually they'll have incense, but that still has a smell, but it keeps out all disagreeable smells away. The idea is, as much as I can, humanly can I keep these doors of my senses closed to keep the objective world outside. Unfortunately, we cannot do that with the mind. Well, how do you close your mind? You can't. So we'll have to find a way of making the mind turn inward. And the only way, people try to find mechanical ways to do it. Sometimes they are helpful, they have limited utility, and the pranayama and the control of breath and so on. All those are good practices, but they have a limited utility, because ultimately, what is the most important thing is, if I want to know who I am, I really must want to know it. Because if I don't want to know it, everything else may be there, all the other facilities may be available, but if I don't want it, then I'm never going to do it. So in some way, if I can convince myself that getting to know myself as I truly am is a worthwhile activity, an activity worth investing my time and energy into, if I can completely convince myself about that, then the practice of prayer, meditation, etc. becomes much easier. So the mechanical means don't always help much. And sometimes when students come to me and say they have difficulty concentrating, not just in meditation, but even in their studies. And the reason is obvious, that if I like something, if I want something, if I really badly, madly, crazily want something, then my mind will go there. It doesn't have to be, you can't force your mind. So if I can convince my mind that this is a good activity, then it becomes easy to do that. Now, while all this is a good theoretical background about subjective knowledge and objective knowledge and all of that, but we have to admit that most of our life, most of the day, we are really busy with objective knowledge. So how do we then, what do we need to do? Do I have to stop all objective knowledge in order to get the knowledge of the subject? Do I have to shut the door to all indirect knowledge in order to get direct knowledge? Is there a way where my indirect knowledge can lead the way to direct knowledge? Is there a way by which objective knowledge can become a bridge to subjective knowledge? And the answer is yes. If I can find a way to connect every objective knowledge that I have with affirming my identity, subjective identity, then it's possible to bridge the gap between the two. And that's what devotees and spiritual seekers try to do. That every little thing that they do, if we can find a way to connect our thinking, our relationships, our work, our speech, in some way finding a place for our spiritual ideal in that one. And there is a verse often used as a mental worship in ritualistic worship. It says that my true being, my true self is God. That the energy that I have, that's the Divine Mother. That all the walking that I do throughout the day is actually going around. And many religious traditions circumambulating or going around a place of worship. going around and around is considered a holy act. So it's possible for us, therefore, that whenever I'm walking, I can mentally imagine that really I'm in a holy place going around a sacred spot. Speaking, no matter what conversation I have, it could be about secular subjects, but I can say, in order to, even my speaking is a form of adoration of the divine. And there is a story that often comes to my mind whenever I think about this. It's that he was this one very unlettered person, but very devoted. He had a small prayer book. And so it had this prayers in the morning, prayer before meals, prayers in the evening, and he was very, very devoted. Devotedly, he will open the book and do those prayers at those set times. Very punctual, I did it for years. And then one day, unfortunately, he misplaced that book. And he didn't have that book. And he was completely lost because he didn't feel he was smart enough to kind of create or devise a prayer of his own, and he had become totally dependent on that book. And he thought, now, how am I going to pray? There is no book. And then suddenly a brainwave came. Then he just goes before the altar with folded hands, then just says A, B, C, D, E, F, G, just goes to the whole letters of the alphabet. And then he tells the Lord, no matter which prayer is really composed of these letters of the alphabet, and you know them, so you please arrange them in your mind and get it done. And I think that's great. The idea is that knowledge is the talking that we do in the course of the day is made up of sound and words. And in prayers are also used with sound and words. So if I can find a way that even my so-called casual conversation is really a form of prayer. Now, it would be difficult to think this way if, when I speak, if I indulge in hurtful speech or hateful speech, or if I tell lies, if I hurt other people, then it would be difficult to think of that speech as prayer. But if I indulge in speech that is loving, kind, compassionate, helpful, then we can look upon speaking as a form of prayer. Again, even when I walk, I can think about it being in a sacred space. Every action that I do, because even in a ritualistic worship, well, there is activity. You're picking up things, you're waving incense, so there is a physical activity. And we are indulging in physical activity throughout the day. It's possible to then look upon every physical activity is a form of puja, a form of worship. So in that way, even when we are engaged with the objective world, even when we are acquiring apparently objective knowledge, it gets connected with our subjective identity, directly or indirectly. And that's the way acquisition of knowledge can become an art. We think about it this way, that when whatever we studied when we were in school, when we were in high school or middle school, how much of that knowledge has really helping us in our life today? Maybe very little. And therefore, we have to see that if I can find a way of not overloading my brain in some ways, and one way would be to simplify our life. If I don't need to know something, why bother wasting my time and energy knowing it if that knowledge is not going to help me in any way? And that way we will find, sometimes we complain that I'm so busy, I don't have time, I don't have energy. And sometimes that may be true. But I do really feel that if I can try to eliminate all useless activity from my life, all useless thinking, useless reading, keep away all this just words and words getting in, we might find that we have a lot more time and energy at our disposal to do the things that we really love and which are really important to us from a larger perspective. So acquiring knowledge is a skill, is an art. And every spiritual seeker, to get spiritual knowledge, we have to be a kind of artist. So practicing this art of acquiring knowledge requires patience, requires perseverance, and requires single-minded focus. And those of us who try to acquire these qualities, patience, perseverance, focus, will find rich dividends, as they say. We might find making real progress in our lives. And ultimately, that's what will matter. At the end of the day, it's not how many books that I have read, or how many lectures I have attended, or how many degrees I have acquired. None of this will matter. At the end of the day, what will matter is, as a person, as a human being, am I now a better human being? That's all that counts. And so long as everything else will help, contribute, make me a better person, that's useful. Otherwise, it's just waste of time and energy. And therefore, I would like to end on a positive note, with the idea that may we look at our own lives and all the knowledge that we have acquired so far and try to see, going forward, what should be my attitude towards knowledge? And what will I do with the knowledge that I already have? How can I use that knowledge in order to first become a better person myself? And to the extent I become a better person, I'll acquire the ability to help those who are around me. So both of these will be possible if acquiring knowledge becomes a very conscious, disciplined activity. It becomes an art in itself. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu. Next Sunday, we'll have Antar Yoga, as we do every month. We'll have spiritual readings, and we'll celebrate the birthdays of all those who are born in the month of February. So those of you who are born in February, and if you have friends and family born in the month of February, bring them all, and then we'll have a big cake waiting for you for celebration. And then on Wednesday, we'll continue with the study of the Kathopanishad. And on Tuesday and Saturday, our Arati and meditation will also continue as usual. Let's conclude with a prayer on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om
Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.